Pharasmanes I would have been born just before the time of Jesus, right around 33 BC. And just like Jesus, Pharasmanes' pregnant mother would be forced to run away from her home in order to safely give birth to the now exiled Prince Pharasmanes. His mother is unnamed throughout the sources, but she was the daughter of Rhadamistus II, who ruled Iberia from 63 BC to 33 BC. His death came when an exiled prince of Iberia named Mirian II came back to Iberia to claim his throne at the head of a massive Parthian army. Pharasmanes' father was also killed in this conflict, and his name was Cartam of Colchis. He was a descendant of Cugi of Colchis through his marriage with Pharasmanes I's sister. Pharasmanes' mother thought that it would be a good idea to flee to the kingdom of Armenia. After all, Rhadamistus II of Armenia and his Roman allies would surely protect this pregnant woman and her infant son from the Parthian Empire. But she was wrong. After a series of events, the Roman general, Mark Antony, captured Rhadamistus and his family for refusing to help him while on campaign against the Parthians. While Rhadamistus would eventually be executed by Antony's wife, Cleopatra, his son would escape. His son's name was Artaxerxes, and who do you think he went to help him win his throne back? That's right, he went straight to the Parthians. After all, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. With no hope of protection from the Armenian king, Pharasmanes' mother went into hiding. She gave birth to the fatherless Pharasmanes. Then she waited. She probably knew that the Romans would return at some point, and when they did, they would want her son to be the king of Iberia. So she bided her time, while her two sons grew from infancy to adolescence. When Pharasmanes was just entering his teenage years, Armenia came under the ownership of a new king. Artaxerxes was so unpopular in Armenia due to his near tyrannical rule, so the Armenian people wrote to the emperor Augustus. They asked the Roman emperor to remove Artaxerxes, so his brother, Tigranes III, could be placed in his stead. Tigranes III had been captured along with his family, but was not executed by Cleopatra along with his father. Instead, he was left imprisoned, and when Cleopatra and Mark Antony were defeated by Augustus, Augustus saw a use in keeping the exiled prince and took him back to live in Rome with him. Tigranes III was educated in Rome, and would return to Armenia in 20 BC. His reign was a peaceful one, and for the next 12 years, he would rule. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Pharasmanes and his family needed. This would guarantee them a spot in the Armenian court that was oh so close to the Iberian court. The Iberian court, at the same time, also experienced a change in leadership, as the usurper Mirian II died, and his son, Artaxerxes II of Iberia, would succeed him in that same year of 20 BC. Pharasmanes spent his time in the Armenian court, probably growing up along with the children of King Tigranes III. His two children were named Tigranes and Aratu, and when King Tigranes III died in 8 BC, things got weird between his kids. Because, well, they married each other, and both became king and queen of Armenia. King Tigranes IV and Queen Aratu hated Roman vassalage, and looked to the Parthian Empire to liberate them, further showing how much of a competition it was to own these two small border kingdoms, nestled between the Roman and Parthian empires. Parthia tried to help release Tigranes IV and Aratu from Roman vassalage, but when Rome threatened that they would invade Parthia, Parthia backed off. Now the dual monarchs are forced to face Augustus alone, but were pleasantly surprised when Augustus continued to let them rule Armenia. This did not sit well with some of the Armenians, who now revolted against Tigranes and Aratu. King Tigranes IV would march with an army to crush these rebels. Unfortunately, the rebels would kill him in 1 AD, and this would force his sister to abdicate her throne to a distant relative, handpicked by Augustus. While King Tigranes IV would die with his Armenian army, a different Armenian army would prove to be very successful. Although they had a much different goal in mind. Instead of quelling internal revolt, a general would invade Iberia with Armenian soldiers. This general's name was Pharasmanes I, and he was here for only one reason: to retake his grandfather's kingdom. This Armenian army would eventually face the current king of Iberia, Artaxerxes II. During this battle, an arrow would find Artaxerxes II and kill him on the spot. On the battlefield, the remaining Iberians would crown Pharasmanes as their new king. Finally, this exiled prince would become king and return to Iberia as a Roman vassal in 1 AD, the same year as the birth of Jesus. Shortly after becoming king, he married the inbred daughter of the deceased King Tigranes IV and had 3 kids with her. First was his heir and son named Rhadamistus. Then after the birth, they had another son named Mirhat, and then another son after him named Armenius. Pharasmanes was born and raised in Armenia, and he would return to his homeland in 35 AD. He would return to Armenia in the exact same way that he left it, at the head of an army. This time, he was assisting his Roman overlord to reclaim suzerainty over Armenia. This overlordship was once again interrupted by the Parthian Empire, when one of their kings, tried to put one of his sons on the Armenian throne. This son's name was Arsaces, and he was so disliked by the Armenians that one of his servants poisoned him. In his place, the new Roman emperor, Tiberius, would order for Pharasmanes' brother to become the new king of Armenia. After all, he was born and raised there. So in 35 AD, Mithridates, the brother of Pharasmanes, would become the king of Armenia after being assisted by the Roman and Iberian armies. Mithridates only ruled for about 2 years, before the mad emperor Caligula had him arrested in order to put a Parthian prince back on the throne of Armenia. This offered a better compromise for Rome, as Iberia would be ruled by a Parthian prince, but remain as a Roman vassal. The prince's name was Arades, and the first thing that he did after becoming the Armenian king was execute the servants who had poisoned his brother just 2 years ago. After Emperor Caligula was murdered by his personal bodyguards called the Praetorian Guards, his uncle Claudius would become the emperor and release Mithridates from prison. After this, he instructed Pharasmanes to put his brother back on the throne of Armenia. Pharasmanes listened, and once again, the two brothers entered their Armenian homeland at the head of a huge Iberian army. The king of Armenia, Arades, would get support from his father, King Rhadamistus of Parthia. These Parthian and Iberian armies would clash in a pitched battle, with Pharasmanes personally leading his army. While in combat, Pharasmanes and Arades ended up fighting one another. The two fought on horseback for a time, until one of them struck a decisive blow. Pharasmanes hit Arades on the head and smashed his helmet in with one blow. The now concussed and dazed Arades turned his horse and fled from the battle, with his army following shortly behind him. Mithridates was then reinstated to his throne in 42 AD, and the two brother kings once again ruled over their two kingdoms. Over the next 10 years, the good relationship held between Mithridates and Pharasmanes soured so bad that Pharasmanes instructed his firstborn son, Rhadamistus, to invade Armenia and overthrow his own uncle. This guy, Rhadamistus, was the worst, and he invaded Armenia and eventually convinced his uncle that he would not harm him if he would just leave his fortress and make peace with him. Eventually, Mithridates left the fortress of Gornius and was met by the embracing presence of his nephew. With convincing words, he lured Mithridates into the woods, where they would conduct a ceremony of peace. Before the ceremony could begin, though, one of Rhadamistus' men grabbed the legs of Mithridates and pinned him to the ground. Then Rhadamistus had him executed by stacking clothes and beds on him until he suffocated. Rhadamistus then butchered the rest of Mithridates' family, only deciding to keep one of his cousins alive. He spared Zenobia, the daughter of Mithridates, and married her before he became king in 51 AD. The new Parthian king named Vologases saw this as a weakness and invaded Armenia to put his brother on the Armenian throne. This brother's name was Tiridates. What is this, like the third different Tiridates now? Anyways, after a year of campaign, Rhadamistus was defeated and fled back to Iberia in 53 AD. The king had made a mistake by letting Rhadamistus escape, though. He would return a year later in 54 and was more psychotic than ever. He retook Armenia and punished whole cities for surrendering to the Parthian armies. After a year of this tyrannical treatment, the Armenian people revolted, and once again Rhadamistus and Zenobia were forced back to Iberia. Zenobia, after years of running and enduring a marriage with the man who murdered her whole family, asked Rhadamistus to finish his work and to murder her as well. Rhadamistus then stabbed his wife with a scimitar and left her body to float down the Aras River. Her body floated on the water and was eventually pulled out by a local man. Astonishingly, Zenobia still clung on to life. The man then bandaged her wound. While healing from her wound, the man learned who she was and handed her over to the Armenian king and Parthian prince Tiridates, who had taken the Armenian throne during the recent revolt. Seeing the tragedy that Zenobia had endured, he welcomed her and treated her as a noble, a bittersweet ending to a very tragic tale. As for Rhadamistus, he returned to his father. Pharasmanes welcomed his son back for a time, until the Roman Empire called. They wanted Rhadamistus dead. His actions almost caused an all-out war between Rome and Parthia, even though Pharasmanes both helped and told his son to take Armenia from his brother. So in 58 AD, possibly as one of the last orders that the 91-year-old King Pharasmanes gave was for the execution of his firstborn son. This would guarantee peace between the Roman Empire and his second-born son, Mirhat. Shortly after Rhadamistus' execution, Pharasmanes would die, in that same year of 58 AD. Pharasmanes was born into a time of constant warfare between Rome and Parthia, who both took turns owning and fighting over the kingdoms of Iberia and Armenia. Although Pharasmanes was able to reclaim Iberia and return it under Roman control, he was cursed with a psychotic, power-hungry son. King Pharasmanes' 57-year reign was a good one for Iberia and a very, very bad one for Armenia. But he realized, perhaps too late, that Rhadamistus had to be stopped.